Hello and welcome to the business Q&A sessions with Meeta and Tosh. Tosh, why were you looking?
I was confused about this new setting. I don't know if everybody else can see it. It's a different layout with Webinar Jam now.
You know what? We have got a brand new
there, different layout here. You know,
yeah.
I saw these Zoom backgrounds and thought I'd just play with a couple of them, Meeta.
Fine. Well, Tosh, you be in that really funky zhuzhy office today for our webinar, and I'm still in our office here. Really welcome to everyone. We had some technical challenges last week. It's really nice to see that everyone is actually joining and the live attendee approach is working again. So whilst Tosh is distracting me with background changes,
right now.
Thank you. Well, there's more sunshine there than there is here in London at the moment. But so, Tosh, great to be back live. Great to have you and me in a room together. We always seem to get feedback on these sessions that they hit the nail on the head in terms of what the issues are and really practical ways of dealing with them. Why do you think grievances and handling them in this new hybrid world is an important topic?
You know, we've had one of the things, Meeta, with us both, you know, coming from industry, we're talking from experience, we're talking about things that are happening right now. You know, we've got a finger on the pulse. Yeah. And a lot of clients have been contacting me about employee complaints or employee grievances and how to handle it. And over the course of the pandemic, I mean, it was a bit like that before, but I've seen a sort of formula and a way or some principles to apply to whatever the grievance is. This doesn't mean that you're going to get off the hook, you know, if the employer sexually harassed an employee, for example. I'm just saying, I'm assuming that none of those things have happened. The employee has raised something that's not justified. And there's a way to handle it in a way that it doesn't go off the rails, or it doesn't go out of control, because a lot of these things are on an emotion, you know, or a sense of injustice. So I've seen a lot of those things coming up now, whether that's flexible working, whether that's people feeling they're being discriminated against, you know, all sorts of things. But you've got to handle it slightly differently when you're not all in the same workplace. But the principles are the same.
Indeed, as you said, the principles are the same, the legal standing and you know, all the processes are the same. However, I think the problems that are creating grievances have shifted completely. You know, you're talking about complaints and people feeling prejudice against things like people who were working. Oh, I think I've lost Tosh. I'll keep talking. We've had a little technical issue there. What I'm really finding is that we're getting people who are working from home, feeling left out of being included in business. We've got people that are working in the offices saying it's not fair that people are working from home. So there's all sorts of discord and challenge that's arising. Are you there, Tosh? Oh, he's left the room. He'll be back in. While Tosh is coming back in, let me quickly do the housekeeping. So we have got the Q&A sessions, as always, 30 to 40 minutes, every Thursday at 11 a.m. We've got the chat box on the right where I've just said hello. This session is going to be as useful as it is interactive. So the more you bring your questions, thoughts, comments to the chat room, the more we can make it really relevant for the challenges you're facing, which usually are the challenges that other people are facing as well, but afraid to bring it up. So put any thoughts or questions into the chat box on the right. And as always, just to get a temperature of the room, we've got a poll going today. And that poll is all around how to handle grievances in a hybrid world. So how are you as an employer now handling grievances? Are you finding the process harder being remote? Are you finding that actually it's no different? In fact, we haven't found that there's any more grievances than before. Or are you finding that, I wouldn't say out of sight is out of mind, it's not, but the fact that people are separated, it's easier, maybe there's less emotion. I certainly feel from the conversations I've been having with our clients that we are seeing that actually employee challenges are more and grievances are more tricky to navigate. And I think that's why the session today, still waiting for Tosh to come in. Here he is, he's joining the room again. I think that's why this session is so important. So with perfect timing, here is our...
Sorry about that. I had a little glitch in the matrix there, but it's got sorted out now.
Good. No more playing with backgrounds, I think.
Yeah, that'll teach me.
Well, Tosh, I was just doing the housekeeping. So just speaking about the poll, if you haven't put your thoughts on the poll, please do. But at the moment, either only 1 out of 50 have put their thoughts in, or everyone is finding the process harder, and therefore you're in the right place. So why don't we go on the basis, which is what we're thinking as well, which is, it is harder to navigate grievances, challenges. One, because they're changing, the reason people are feeling a grievance or experiencing challenges, and two, everyone's all over the show in terms of geographical location. It becomes a little bit like the perspective of one is completely different to the other, even though they're looking at the same thing.
Not even just geographical locations, Meeta. There's difference in time zones as well. People are working abroad, or when the pandemic first hit, they went somewhere else because they think it didn't matter working remotely. All those sorts of things that have come up.
Yeah.
But as I say, the takeaway I want for this webinar for everybody is to really go away equipped to handle any employee grievance. So it's the principles apply across the board no matter what. But as I said at the beginning, before I got kicked off, this is not a getting off the hook if employers have got it wrong. There's different strategies and approaches to deal with those things. So there's always a solution. Don't think there isn't one. But this is when you've got an employee grievance, what do you do? So I'm going to walk you through that step by step.
Brilliant. So the areas we're covering are knowing your case and what exactly you're dealing with.
Yeah.
The second area we're going to cover is how to avoid legal action. That is the big thing, because it's costly, it's time consuming, and really there's no winners in the end. You lose good people, it's bad for reputation, the employees who remain in the company, it leaves a bad taste in everyone's mouth. So we don't want that. Looking at what the best outcomes on any grievance raised is, and we're talking about a prescriptive approach. And I really like that, because again, so many employers, hopefully we're not dealing with grievances every day, but it would be really good to go back to a blueprint of, right, this is where we are, this is step one, this is step two.
Blueprint is the right word. That's exactly what I want to give them.
Good, fantastic. And then really interesting take on this is something you wanted to put into the overview, is that let's start looking at solutions at the start. Don't just wait for feedback and information, but let's think about solutions straight away. Rather than
people become entrenched in their position straight away, Meeta. We've got I'll give you a typical scenario. It's the emotional employee ranting with the grievance. Then the employer becomes entrenched in their position. Everyone takes a stance. Guess what happens? They call somebody like me, and they're not quite like me, and they start arguing about stuff rather than figuring it out. It's about taking a balanced view right at the beginning. So I'm going to give a little balcony view on that for everybody as well. And I also, remember, this is a live Q&A session, unless you're watching the replay, obviously. After this. So put your questions in the chat.
I said that.
We're here to answer specific problems you're facing. Ask us. We will definitely answer it right now. And if it was really challenging, or you're feeling shy for whatever reason, then take it offline. Meeta and I continually say every single week, and it's true, contact us. Our details will have been in the email when you registered. You'll have our email contact details and all that sort of stuff. So call us, please. We are happy to help.
Yeah, and actually, professionally, you mediate in scenarios like this to avoid legal ramifications. And I did an article today on LinkedIn. If you're not following us on LinkedIn, please do. We have some really good insight and just food for thought on there, and in real snippets. But we were talking about the fact that the quest for talent at this time is ridiculous. You've got your perfect storm of Brexit and the pandemic, and we are suffering, not just as a city, but as a country. The shortage is huge. And ironically for us, even though we're in the professional game of finding people, we're finding it hard to find the right people for ourselves as well. So, the challenge is not lost. So actually, retention trumps all else, because if you hire and then retain your people, they'll become the ambassadors of the future, and they will be a great window onto the world of hiring the next incumbents into the organization. But if you've got a leaky bucket, one thing, it's hard enough finding the right people who are available. If they're then seeing everyone leaving, they're not going to, put foundations in. They're going to be leapfrogging from your world to another. And grievances and how businesses handle the difficult challenges speak so much for how people stay and how well you retain people.
That's to do with culture, how you operate, the way you think, what matters to you. Which just very quickly, as a quick side thing, somebody got an award, didn't they, for something?
I did.
Come on, Meeta, don't get shy now.
Oh, do you know what? I wish I was, someone that would be like, hey, actually, you know what? I'm very.
It is way.
I won an award on Friday. I was nominated for Businesswoman of the Year, and it was a shortlist of 4 women, and I won, which is really an honour, because it was to recognise my contribution to business and the business community over the last year, and that makes me really proud, because we have tried really hard to support our network, and we've done that because we understand the challenge that it's uncharted territory. So thank you, Lenka. Thank you so much. And I just want to make sure that we continue to do good work for everyone and help great organizations attract, retain, and develop great people to go from success to success.
And it's a real congratulations, right? This isn't like that, don't think this is like some sort of fix with me, her mum, her husband, and her daughter voting. And typical Meeta didn't want to mention it, so in typical me, I thought I would. So really, really well done there. That says volumes.
Thank you, Tosh, and thank you, everyone. Now I never get shy now. So back to the topic. What everyone knows here is that Tosh and I strive for being exceptional and bringing you real solutions as quickly as possible. Time is precious, and problems are, the way I'm seeing it, Tosh, is that grievances are on the up, and the poll currently is still 100% finding the process harder. So shall we dig in?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the first thing I want to talk about is knowing your case, right? Yeah. So, and language, I always talk about language shaping behavior. People use synonymously complaint, grievance. Sounds really glum, doesn't it? The way I always look at it, if an employee raises a grievance, it should be saying, I'm unhappy about something. Yeah. Or it should be, help me. No matter how confrontational or aggressive the tone of that email will be, you can probably imagine most complaints, if you think of the psychology of it, come from an emotional standpoint. Yeah. I'm upset. I've suffered an indignation. You've disrespected me. I didn't get the pay rise I was entitled to. Yeah. I should have got that promotion. That manager is undermining me, whatever the situation is. So it's coming from an emotion. And how good do you think the decisions are when they're based on emotions? 0 points for that. I say it's not probably like that, but it's like making a decision if you're drunk. Yeah. You're not thinking clearly. So you can imagine the typical grievance. An employer will receive a grievance, and it will probably be some sort of a rant. Yeah, I'm unhappy about this. You did this to me, and it will be their perception, their truth of the situation, right? Whether it's bullying, whether it's discrimination, whatever. Which is why this topic is for any employee grievance that's raised, right? That's what you'd expect.
Indeed. And I like bringing the hybrid angle in, because this is a new element, I guess, that businesses are experiencing and leaders are experiencing, which is this perception of people being at home versus what's going on in the office is so poles apart that it creates misunderstanding. And I always speak about communication being the number one key to success in anything, whatever you set your mind to, having that clarity of communication, which then builds the trust and confidence. And it's harder, as much as we've got all the technology and we've got all the intentions, when people feel a certain way and they haven't got an immediate access to somebody to bounce off or offload, and being stuck in a room like this does make it harder, because you start to go more insular. It means that actually businesses have to work harder at getting people to connect and talk about what their challenges are. And it's even things like, my job's changed, I don't feel valued, I feel left out, I wasn't invited to that online thing, I go in the office and it doesn't feel the same. People start, there's just so much going on with that. Most important thing, as you said, Tosh, is that belonging, the culture. And then that raises problems that might not have existed before.
And I think it might create some sort of an internet troll syndrome, if I just made that up. Where they start typing things so they're not talking to anybody, so they start writing it down because they feel a bit braver about writing it down. It wouldn't be the same. It wouldn't be expressed in the same way if it was said face to face. So they feel a bit stronger about certain things. And again, it's just that rush of emotion that can often come out. And you can read an email in the way that you read the email. Tone can be completely misinterpreted, or might not be, but it might come across as quite aggressive, and all those sorts of things. So that should be, we should just step back a bit before we get in a grievance, and the first instinct as a boss is to say, what the hell, what is this about? You're accusing me of discrimination, or it's very personal.
Yeah, so it's almost a case of whatever triggers the grievance, whether it's really obvious stuff for you, but for me, not so much. We've got our grievance process in our handbook, and from time to time we've had to evolve it. Also, we try to say, well, look, why don't we just have a chat, see if we can, but does the grievance process start with something put in writing formally? How does it work?
It doesn't have to be. Remember, we're talking about two things here. One is a legal case. The legal case, if things end up to tribunal, you want to have a paper trail.
Yeah.
So you want it in writing. It needs to be in writing to set it out. But that's normally what would happen. That's what you would expect to happen in those circumstances. So the employee will write a letter of grievance, and I'll just say, imagine it's an emotional rant saying all sorts of things. Your first instinct shouldn't be just necessarily a response to set up a grievance meeting.
Yeah.
Depending on the nature or tone or seriousness of it, it would be quite good to pick up the phone and say, hey, what's happening? Let's find another. Let's talk about this first before you obviously got to the point where you feel that you need to write this. Let's have a chat first. I'm not saying we don't need to go down this formal route, but let's see if there's another way. If that's something that's appropriate, it might not be, right?
No, and I think to add to that is really important to say, I'm sorry you're feeling this way. It's not accepting blame. It's not accepting that you've done something wrong, but you as an employer will be sorry that somebody in your organization isn't thriving or feeling good about everything. And I think, as we spoke about language shaping behavior, if this employee feels trust in you as the employer to work towards their best interests within the confines of the best interests of the business, they will start working from the point of you both being on the same side, or whoever they've got the grievance against, rather than it becoming loggerheads.
The Stephen Covey, from the author of the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, one of his 7 habits is seek to understand before you seek to be understood.
Yeah.
So in a game of poker, it might be, well, let's see what their hand is before you play your own hand.
Sure.
So I guess what I'm saying is we get this complaint. The first response should break down those complaints. So it should be something like you say, we're sorry to hear that you feel this way. Just to relay back to you, we understand your grievances to be as follows, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 10, whatever they are, break it, condense it down. You can put a paragraph into one sentence, right? You say that on this day, so-and-so did this to you by doing this. Number 2, whatever the different grievances, so break it down, because that will start to form your agenda for the grievance later on, right? So when you've gone down and you've said, this is what we understand, please confirm that these are indeed your grievances. We've summarized it correctly. And also, please provide us with all supporting information or evidence that you have relating to these complaints.
Yeah.
And that includes details of any witnesses and what they might say, details of what happened, where they happened, documents, emails, WhatsApp messages, recordings, whatever they have, ask for full detailed support, because it's their grievance. Okay.
Question. Sorry, I'm jumping in right at the end there. You said it's their grievance, so they should bring evidence. But one of the words you mentioned about witnesses, for me, is a bit contentious, because if you think about employees sort of talking to each other on their own, sometimes that can start to create this almost, like pack mentality. Yeah, this person did that to me. Did you see it? Is it better to ask for witness names that you can then go to? Or would you...
It doesn't really matter either way. Normally you would do, because it will probably relate to an employee in the workplace, and we would have to, as the employer, would have to go and then ask that person. Yeah. So-and-so says that you witnessed this. Can you tell us about this incident? And you refer to what the complaint is. That's normally the way it would be done. You wouldn't ask the employee to start bringing them. Just tell us who it is that you want to call as a witness and what you believe they will say. Because what we need to do, once we've got all their information, remember, we're seeking to understand before we seek to be understood. We've got all they've shown their hand. We are now going to investigate before we start the meeting. So you would say in your letter, response, we understand your grievances are 1, 2, 3, 4, 10. Please, can you please confirm that's correct? Or if there's anything else, let us know. Please also provide us full details of these complaints. What happened, where it happened, what was said, who the witnesses are, any supporting documentation, recordings, everything you got. When you say on receipt of this, we will be able to look into this further before we set up a grievance meeting. Something like that, right? When you get all the information, you then investigate. So the law requires you to carry out a reasonable investigation. You know what I'm going to say?
Your favorite word.
I love that word as a lawyer. We'll sit there all day long. Yeah. And reasonable does mean, according to the size, administrative resources, ask the right questions. Speak to the employees. If there's a witness that's been named, you could say, look, so-and-so has said this. What do you have to say about it? And you write that down and send it.
On a practical level now, again, just for, if this is a grievance between an employee and a manager would then refer it to HR, and if not HR, another senior person in the organization?
Correct. So you want somebody independent from the accusations or from the situation or the problem about, because, just at least, even if that person is very fair, reasonable, impartial, you want to be seen to be fair, reasonable, impartial, not just be it. Yeah. And the best way to do that is to get somebody who can look at it with fresh eyes, is the phrase we use.
Right. Okay. So get somebody independent to reasonably investigate.
Correct. So normally, the complaint will be sent to somebody, whoever that person is, and presumably it won't be the person that the complaint is about, if it's bullying, for example. And if it is, that's obviously going to be one of the people you're going to ask. You're also going to potentially make them available for the grievance meeting itself. You don't have to, but in terms of it being fair, if somebody produces a witness statement, the first thing the employee should be able to do is challenge that. Yeah. And we can't go back and forth witness statements. So you might call that person in, right? So just to be clear, we've got our information now from the employee. We're satisfied what the grievances are. So we now go carry out an investigation, and then we write to the employee saying, right, we will repeat it. We're now inviting you to a grievance meeting at this date, this time. Yeah. And we set out what the allegations are, which she's already got the complaints or grievances are, which we've already confirmed with her. I don't know why I said her, him. Them. Them. And then you've also including all the evidence or information that you're going to rely on to come to your decision. That will be all the stuff she sent, or them, and all the stuff that we've brought up as a result of our investigation. We're going to look at emails, documents to see what matches up. Yeah. So now the employee has all of that documentation. Now, the principles, if it was in person, Meeta, it would be, send it in the post or give it to them if they're working there, right? And then they'd attend and you'd sit face to face. Yeah. If it's remote, you'll send it by email. It doesn't need to be recorded delivery or hard copies or anything like that. Yeah. You simply do it as an email or as a link or WeTransfer or whatever online platform. And the meeting can be done Teams, Zoom, whatever you want. It doesn't have to be in person. Okay. Okay. So now we come to the meeting. How is that meeting conducted? So you'll have somebody who's a chair of that meeting, the one that's making the decision. You presumably have somebody else in attendance, maybe that investigating officer, so they can answer any questions if there was anything like that. Can they be the same person in a small organization, or do they have to be different? Yeah, you know what? Sometimes it's one person. There's one person in there. That's fine. If I think about, let's get out of the detail. Why are we doing this? It's to be, if it ever ends up in a tribunal, we want to be able to show that we've been fair and reasonable in all the circumstances, which includes the size and administrative resources of the organization. They don't expect you to foot a $5,000 bill for an HR person to come and run it if you can't afford that, or if that's not the way. So and it doesn't have to cost that. It can be very, very cost effective, or get guidance on it, right? But yes, it doesn't have to be cost prohibitive. It depends on who's there. So normally the setup is a director, presumably not involved in the complaint, and a person that is probably an HR person taking minutes, and the employee has the right to be accompanied by another employee from the company, same company, or a trade union rep, not their mother, their brother, their mate, but you know what, they're probably at home. So maybe, I know that's not their right. Does it really matter? As long as that person isn't going to be disruptive and they're told that they can only attend as a witness and they can't answer questions on behalf of that employee, well, then we're okay. It's just got to be controlled so it doesn't get emotional and out of hand, especially if it's I've seen situations where it's a husband, for example, and obviously they're backing up their wife and they start arguing about these things, but they don't really know what's going on. And again, it's just a natural emotional response to have their wife's back. Yeah. So again, this process of reflection on the grievance, investigating, getting everyone in a room to feed back, what outcomes are you finding are sort of presenting themselves at the moment, and what challenges are arising? What are you finding is going on the ground at the moment? So we get to the grievance meeting, right? And what I've noticed, not noticed for years, in fact, is employees are there based on their truth. So what has happened, right? Let's say they were bullied. Let's say something did happen, but the law doesn't look at what the truth is. Oh, that sounds horrible, doesn't it? The law looks at what does the evidence suggest has happened. Yeah. So there's a different principle. We've covered that balance of probabilities in previous webinars, right? So that's a really difficult thing for an employee and employer to get their head around. Not what is the truth, what does the evidence suggest has happened? So I'll give you an example, Meeta. Forget that this is a live video and we've got people watching us and all that sort of stuff, right? Imagine it was just you one-on-one.
Yeah.
And let's say we're on a phone call. Forget there's a telephone record as well.
Yeah.
And I say, and you say, yep, Tosh, you and I were on a phone call at, what time is it now? 11:25 a.m.
Yeah.
And I say, no, I'm a solicitor of the senior courts. I never lie. It was 11:25 p.m.
Yeah.
Do you think they'll believe on a balance of probabilities one person's wording is the other?
Well, probably you, because you're a man of the court, but I've got a window showing daylight in the record.
So the answer is you.
Yeah.
Probably. I'll tell you why. You thought my credentials are enough. There's lots of dodgy lawyers and rubbish lawyers out there as well. So it's not. What a court would do, and which is the way that you need to do it when you're doing it in a grievance meeting, is what does the evidence suggest? So Tosh, why are you talking at 11:25 p.m.? Are your offices open? Yeah. What are the circumstances that you would be speaking? Now, there might be a truth if there was a truth, but obviously we know it's not because it's 11:25.
Yeah.
26 now. So whatever's going to come out of my mouth is a lie. Whereas what's your truth? Even if you've got nothing to back it up, well, I had this meeting in the morning. I had to stop this call with Tosh at 11 o'clock, which is why I won the call. During the call, we did this. There's more layers. There's more texture to your version of events. Yeah. So your version of events are going to be more preferable. It's like a 51% rule. What's likely to have happened, not beyond a reasonable doubt. So when the employee's coming there, all emotional and saying these things have happened, whether they have or they haven't, the employer doesn't know whether they have or they haven't. They've got to look at the evidence and base it on what does the evidence suggest has happened. Yeah, that's the key difference.
And that's so important because again, it's everyone's perception is their reality, and this is kind of like a chasm that we're trying to fill, isn't it? But one statement that hasn't come up yet that I think is important, and I wanted to know your thoughts on where this question arises, is what about asking them what they want from this grievance process? Like, what outcomes are they hoping to see?
I'll often ask so in the letter, I missed that, but you're right. When we do the response letter saying, here's, these are your allegations. Can you give us all the evidence supporting your allegations? Can you also let us have the outcomes that you're looking for?
Yeah. What do you want to see
right at the beginning
from this, or what would make you feel that this grievance has been handled right? Is that fair to put those questions that way?
Absolutely. We're not even saying the grievance. We're just saying what outcomes are you looking for? And what comes back tends to be something, because at the moment, most of the time, the grievance will just be a rant. Yeah. But maybe they want money. At least we know where they're coming from.
Yeah.
Maybe they want something, a training issue. Maybe they want a mediation with somebody. Yeah. You don't have to do what they say, but let's have an idea where they're coming from. Remember, we're seeking to understand before we seek to be understood.
And on that note, I think the hybrid approach is bringing up new challenges. For example, I'm hearing about employees that want first of all, we know that salaries are being evolved based on travel. So people are losing income because they're not traveling anymore. That's causing grievances. People are asking for work from home grants because they've had to buy this and that. And, all of a sudden employers are like, well, I'm being added to my costs after a tough year. That's not where I want to be. So again, it's grievances that might not have already had a place in the business, but now do. So I like the thought of, again, thinking commercially as an organization, is it time to evolve your practice over invest many people hours trying to resolve the grievance? So actually, like you said, Tosh, look at it objectively and have a think about whether it's just better to give a £50 allowance. I don't know, whatever's practical or whatever the outcomes are required.
That's directly in line with the situation we dealt with very recently with a client. So they ended up it was a sex discrimination complaint, which had no grounds whatsoever. In fact, the employer was really, taken aback by it because they go the extra mile for their staff and so forth. And this person taking things out of context. And it was a lot. It was a lot. They had to go in and we had to help them go in quite strongly because it's such a serious allegation and she wanted money. And so they had to go very, very clearly about what the situation was. And at the end of the process, they were very grateful. We resolved it and all that sort of stuff. But they said, gosh, it was, that was a really lengthy and time-consuming process, not just a costly one. And so maybe we should have just paid him off, just like you said. And I said, but think about where you are now, because you've got to decide whether you're paying this one off and then the next one and the next one, because now what you have is a different set of skills. Now you're like a Liam Neeson, you've got a particular set of skills that can deal with employee grievances. You don't need us. You know how to handle any employee grievance now. You've gone through this process. And actually now what they're having in place is they're telling all staff, look, we've got no problem if, it's a difficult time, you're feeling isolated or whatever the situations at work, please approach us. Have a grown-up conversation with us. Don't sit there. I mean, you're not going to say mulling it in your own mind and start, scribbling away. Everything isn't a court case. We're trying to make things work at work. Yeah. So you're right. You could pay him off, but just be clear. Don't do it as a knee-jerk reaction. Make sure you're not setting a precedent for others to do the same thing. Well, you paid so-and-so off. Let's go for it.
Yeah. So we're talking about this prescriptive approach, and you've sort of walked us through how to deal with it from the initial indication of a challenge right through to this meeting. What happens? Two different scenarios, right? Either the employee says, brilliant, that might then have repercussions on other people in the organizations, which might raise its own set of grievances, or the employee says, I'm not happy with it. So what would an employer do at that point from those two scenarios?
So to protect themselves from legal action, and when I say protect themselves, you can't stop an employee raising a complaint and pursuing a matter in an employment tribunal, okay? Unless there's jurisdictional issues and all those sorts of things, but you can't stop them physically, unless there's like a settlement agreement that legally is a binding agreement that stops them from pursuing it, okay? Yeah. What we can do is make sure they're going to lose. So the purpose of this grievance is to be able to demonstrate that you've considered all the evidence reasonably, you've come to a decision on a balance of probabilities, which means you've explained, remember, we've set out all the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 allegations. We've said, this is what we looked at, and this was our finding, that it wasn't, that we didn't find a balance of probabilities. We believe this didn't happen. This is what happened. Yeah. Something like that, right? So we got all the way through. We don't uphold the employee's grievance. What happens next is your question.
Yeah. Yeah, indeed. And it might be that if there are 5 things, some of them they might uphold and some of them they might not. So it might be a mixed.
The key thing for employers is to really understand what happens after the grievance. Because let's say the employers raise a bullying complaint and we don't find in their favor. Well, they've still got to come back to work.
Yeah.
So we've got to facilitate that return. But from the legal point of view, first of all, they've got a right of appeal, the employee. The employee can appeal against the decision and we do the dance all over again. Yeah. And we will rehear all the issues, understand what the grounds for the appeal were, why they don't find in our favor. And remember, if something has happened to them as a fact for the employee, but the evidence supports it, they may well appeal because they just can't get their head around that something might have happened and we can't, if you can't prove it, you can't prove it, right? Yeah. So that's one thing. But then afterward, let's say, if there's a bullying complaint and it's not well-founded, what about a mediation between those two people? What about sitting down and talking? These are the rules of engagement going forward, okay? Don't feel awkward. Yes, you've raised it, we've addressed it, and it wasn't the way you thought it was, and this is where we found it. So if we're going to move forward positively, this is what we suggest. Do a mediation. That doesn't mean you've got to pay a mediator. A lot of employers will have those skills or negotiation skills, or if you don't, then get somebody in. Yeah. Sit them down. Cracking skulls is the wrong phrase. Yeah. Sit them down and get them to see it from the other person's shoes and how we're going to go forward. Maybe the person has an avenue to go to an HR person if there's an issue going forward, right? We just don't want a grievance meeting every single time there's a problem.
No, and again, it's this whole culture around an organization, what you want to be known for as an employer when a grievance is raised. Caring, considerate, thorough, or almost like, well,
it goes a long way, Meeta. The client situation I spoke about, they were absolutely that person, really caring. They were shocked because they just weren't those people. Yeah. And the fact they couldn't even understand how this person would look at every single thing the wrong way. Yeah. And I saw that, and that made the process much easier because they weren't, we weren't spoon feeding them. This wasn't some sort of a script we've got to give them. They needed to know the parameters, like we're telling our audience right now. Obviously, in a bit more detail when we're going through the actual process. But it was easy because it was coming from here. Yeah. It was, they just want to make sure they don't do something that the law would trip them up, but it won't if they're coming from a good place.
No, and that again for me is, I always speak when we do our induction and we have our staff handbook and we have our grievance process addressed in that. And I always say, look, we have a process that we adhere to protect you as an employee, to know that we've considered that if things, we're here to make sure it all goes right. But if ever something isn't right, you can trust that we've considered a process that will support you in that journey. And exactly. I think that's really important. And I think that we should perhaps evolve those things for hybrid working now, to say in a hybrid working world, you may be at home, please do this, please do that to help you not feel isolated. And so the next question I have for you, Tosh, is, one of your points that we were going to are discussing is around solutions at the beginning and asking people what outcomes they want. If you've got a grievance letter, could you do the mediation straight away and say, let's not, if they have a satisfactory outcome, not have a grievance process?
Absolutely, as long as you agree with the employee's right to raise a complaint, and those are the steps to a tribunal. What you don't want is, oh yeah, my employer stopped me from doing it. They wanted to do a mediation. I didn't want to do that. And don't forget, a lot of employees won't do that. Sometimes when I'm advising employees, I say, what would it take for you to go back to work and make it work? Nothing. It's gone too far. I can never, ever go back there. Okay, what if they pay you £1 million a year? Okay, I could probably go back then. Okay, so somewhere between your current salary and £1 million, there's a lower figure. So there are scenarios. It's not like something's been so fundamental. Obviously they're not going to get £1 million. The point is just to reframe their thinking about the situation, and then you start to get out of that the emotional decision-making thing that's driving everything, right?
Yeah.
So understanding that you early on talk about a resolution. So I guess what I'm saying, Meeta, is let's use you and me as an example. If I've asked you what solutions you're looking for, and one of the things you say are money or mediation or something, it's a perfect opportunity for me to say, look, we can go down this process, but it seems practical. Why don't we just talk about these options that you want to talk about? If you want to raise Meeta for a sum of money, then I don't like it. But if that's what you want, then let's explore it. Yeah. And if it doesn't meet to something that we're all agreeable with, well, then we go back to the grievance process.
And that's legal to say.
Absolutely. The idea, remember, what you won't be able to do if ever it goes wrong, as it ends up in a tribunal, and stand up and say, well, we did this because we thought it was reasonable. Yeah. Well, she felt she couldn't pursue it. No, that wasn't the case. Yeah. We put it in writing. We were happy to consider these things. Yeah. But it was only can we get away from it? No? Good. Let's get on with it then.
Yeah.
So you're not taking away options. You're giving the employee better choices.
Got it. I'm always astounded at how quickly our sessions go, Tosh. It is 3 minutes away from a 14-minute session, which we promised to be the full extent of our sessions. As we know, everyone's time is precious who takes the time to sign up. No questions today, so hopefully this means that we're talking about what everyone needs to hear, or
if there is anything in the last 2 minutes, chuck it in the chat.
Yeah,
we'll happily address specific issues that you might be dealing with if it hasn't already been covered, right?
One thing I would ask you in closing is, at what point does an employer call you? Like, at what point do they think, right, this is getting out of hand, I'm potentially going to be sued, or it's causing unrest in the, like, at what point do they need legal representation and support?
It's not so much the legal representation. What you want, Meeta, is someone who knows what they're doing, how to handle those situations. I happen to be a lawyer, that's all I suppose. So what is the right point? The point would be as soon as you don't know what to do. Yeah. Don't think that me or any lawyer, if you've got your own, is going to have a clock ticking straight away. You can sound them out. You can talk to them. You can talk to us, figure out what it is, and maybe you're okay with that. And you can go on your way because you've got enough information, or find out a price or whatever it is to resolve it and make sure that it's within a budget and it's worth your while. I always say this to clients, it's got to be that the juice is worth the squeeze. Yeah. If it's not worth it, then you'll find another way of resolving it. But whenever you're stuck, you don't know what to do, speak to somebody like me early.
Yeah, we've got a couple of questions coming through, so I love it. So Lenka is asking, what if someone submits a grievance and then goes on long-term sick leave?
You can deal with the grievance still remotely in their absence. It can be done in writing, Lenka. It doesn't have to be in a meeting. It just seems a meeting is obviously the best way to do it. Otherwise, we have this internet troll syndrome, isn't it? Everybody hiding behind letters. Yeah. You know how email conversations go.
They're not
from back. What's up in it? We've got to talk to each other. Okay, now let's do an email just confirming what's discussed. So if they won't participate, again, a tribunal will see that's reasonable. You can deal with that through correspondence. Just to let them know that's what you're doing.
So you can literally say they've gone on long-term sick. You've submitted this grievance. Would you like for it to be dealt with while you're off sick, or would you like to wait till you're back and then we can pick it up?
As somebody advising the employer, I wouldn't give them that option. Because they could be on a long-term sick and then everything's just on hold. Yeah. So we would say, look, it doesn't look like you're back. Are you happy for it to continue in writing? They're going to probably say yes. If they don't, well, then how do you propose we progress this? Maybe it will be writing to the doctors. Can they attend a grievance meeting? And a lot of the time, they won't attend. I mean, they normally attend it, but if they won't attend a grievance or disciplinary, the doctor has to be able to confirm that they can't attend. And then the employer is reasonable in continuing in their absence.
Yeah.
So you can still, that won't stop things, Lenka, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. Understood. That's brilliant. Right. You just got a couple of questions and they're really good ones. Again, if you, so this one is, if you want a different role in a restructure, but they keep you in the dark, assuming you continue doing anything required, when is best to reevaluate the position with the employer? Or go on, Tosh.
No, please, you go first.
Well, for me, I think it's very much about whether you see yourselves on a path together or apart, because it's about trust and confidence, and it's about belief in the role you're doing, why you're doing the role, all the reasons you took the job in the first place. So if this experience has created a mistrust, the first thing to do is think in yourself, why? I personally would take it to your employer as soon as you've got a challenge, rather than, again, making assumptions, you know. And I think it's really important for employees to say, can you help me understand why? And it's okay for an employer to say, this is how much I can tell you. This is the bit that is I can't discuss with you. Is that all right? Fair to say, Tom?
Absolutely. You know, assumptions, perceptions, that's where things are going wrong.
Yeah.
And you know what? Yeah, as a solicitor, I know we're talking about the grievance processes because this is what today's topic is about. I'm not telling you to do that. I am actually saying, have a grown-up conversation with your people. You know, if they raise a complaint, try and create a little bit of a pattern interrupt rather than going down that channel. You know, everybody becomes entrenched. Speak to them. Yeah. Exactly what Meeta just said. Talk to them about what the situation is. If you're an employee, you don't know what to do, raise it with your employer. Tell them what it is. Give them a chance to resolve it. Explain not only what the problem is, but why it's a problem and how you would like it resolved. Spell it out for them, right? Don't give them anything to think about. And then it makes things reasonable. And if it doesn't resolve, then you can consider raising a grievance or speaking to somebody like me to know what to do, or you know, how the best way to get the outcome, right?
Yeah, and I think just the engagement from an employer. First of all, an employee going in and saying, these are my challenges, an employer saying, let's review those and let's help us understand them, goes a long way to you not necessarily having to re-evaluate working for the organization, but actually just seeing it from a perspective that gives you more knowledge and information to make the right decision. Absolutely right. One more question, just knowing that we are now a couple of minutes over the 40 minutes, but it's a good question actually, because it's around holiday. And it's which are benefits and rewards are big business at the moment. So Eva's asking, with holidays, is it one extra day added for every 3 years of employment? And again, I'm going to say that apart from your statutory requirements, the rest is for you to decide with an organisation on the basis that it's frowned upon to give any more than 5 days for every year. So for 5 years, because then it gets seen as discriminatory on
age discrimination. Exactly right. I mean, which is, you know, I suppose it's supposed to be on the basis of experience, and it's a reward-based system. But what you said is spot on, Meeta. Eve, the position is 28 days a year, including the 8 bank holidays, public bank holidays in the UK. That's the minimum. Anything you put on top is up to you, and you put it in the contract. There's no obligation. Also, in the 12-month period or the annual leave period, you use it or you lose it. There's no legal obligation to carry over, again, unless it's in your contract. Yeah.
And I'll tell you what's quite interesting is the way organizations are delivering their rewards and benefits, because we see job descriptions and reward packages every day. And one of the ones is, you know, an employee had written 40 days of holiday. And I thought, God, I've seen 20 plus.
NHS.
No, what they were doing was rolling in the bank holidays in what they give. So they were giving, they were saying up to 40 days. So it was 24 flat plus extra for long term plus the bank holidays. So up to 40 days. But you think about an employee looking at that versus an employer saying 24 days holiday plus 8 bank holidays plus extra for long term. So really, if you're thinking about when somebody is aggrieved or somebody is looking at your organization and making a decision, really think about the benefits of what you're trying to give them as well. So not just what you're trying to achieve as a business, but how that will help the employee as well. And I think that will go a long way in handling things.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all kudos, isn't it, as well? Just open transparency and understanding how you're valuing your people.
Yeah. Good. I really hope that answered everyone's questions today. Thank you for your involvement and making it relevant and useful in the time we're here. Tosh, any parting words of wisdom?
I'm going to do what I said all the way through here. Seek to understand before you seek to understood. Don't let yourself get dragged into these situations or the emotional of these situations. step back, know what you're dealing with, and then take the steps we talked about during this webinar.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Tosh. We're back at 11 a.m. next Thursday. Have a great week. Keep an eye out for us on LinkedIn. We'll be doing some follow-up pieces. And stay safe and well, everyone. Thanks, Tosh.
Bye, everybody. Have a great week. Bye-bye.